All right, open the meeting of the Sacramento Transportation Authority for December 6, 2017. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Good morning, directors. Campion? Carr? Fox? Here. Frost? Here. Gatewood?
Here.
Guerra?
Here.
Hansen?
Here.
Harris?
Here.
Howell?
Here.
Hume? Natoli?
Yeah.
Peters? Here. Chenier?
Here.
Cerna?
Here.
Suen?
Here.
Kennedy?
Here.
And you have a quorum.
Thank you. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? And then you can read it next to you.
We're going to have to switch off here.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting of the Sacramento Transportation Authority is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed caption and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will replay Sunday, December 10th, at 2 p.m. on Channel 14. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker identification form located at the back of chambers and give it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. If you have any electronic devices, please silence them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to welcome Director Fox. I believe this is your first meeting?
No, second.
Second meeting?
Yeah.
Welcome to your second meeting.
Welcome to your second meeting. You made a memorable impression last time. With that, I have no cards for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the public that would like to make a comment not on the agenda? Please fill out a card after you get up and speak.
It's on consent. So we're good.
Okay.
We need to pull it off the consent, Mr. Speaker. Oh, I'm sorry, it was on consent, it was no longer on consent. Oh, no, it isn't. It's number 9 on consent, yes.
Number 9? Okay. So we will, we're going to call that item, and you can speak at that time. Anybody else from the audience would like to speak? Okay, thank you. Then, item number 2, Executive Director's Report. Mr. Hom.
Thank you for making the time today to be at today's special meeting to take care of a handful, well, just a couple of really time-sensitive items. We have the board chambers reserved until noon today, but I'm confident that we can accomplish everything that we need to accomplish by then. Next week on the 14th, we will return to our regular meeting day of Thursdays, the second Thursday of the month, at 1:30 p.m. That will be our second meeting in the month of December, and after that, we will meet again on January 11th. These series of meetings that are so close together, they're required for us to meet some SB1 deadlines that just came upon us. And in fact, because SB1 timelines are so tight, I just want to say thank you to all of your staffs who have done a great job in getting their items to me in a timely manner. It's been a lot of extra work for them and for all of us, but it's been a good process. On today's consent calendar is the board meeting schedule for 2018. As in the past, we've asked you to reserve the second Thursday of every month except for the month of July. Still, our aim is to continue consolidating items together so that we don't have to meet as often. I will work with the chair to cancel upcoming meetings as those opportunities arise. Also on the consent calendar is the first of 2 Caltrans related items. The first one is a fund transfer agreement where they provide us funding for our freeway service patrol programs in Yolo and Sacramento counties. This year's amount is just shy of $1.2 million. After Agenda Item 10, the board will convene in Hearing Room 1 for a closed session regarding STA personnel matters. This was an abbreviated Executive Director's Report. Next week at our regular meeting, I will provide you a full update on the STA's activities and our current status. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Okay, Madam Clerk.
Okay. Your next items are your consent matters, items 3 through 6.
Any item?
I'll move consent.
Okay, it was moved by Director Howell, seconded by Director Guerra. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Item number 7, updated Measure A revenue forecast.
Good morning, members of the board. Today I'm presenting the first long-term revenue projections developed in conjunction with our financial consulting team for the new Measure A program since its inception in 2009. The revenue projections before you today are lower than original projections included in the authority's plan of finance, which were based on a roughly 5% annual growth rate in sales tax revenue over the life of the program. Our current projections estimate an average growth rate of 3.3%, which includes cyclical recessions through 2039 when the current program sunsets. The revenue projections before you also include the Sacramento Countywide Transportation Mitigation Fee Program, commonly referred to as the Mitigation Fee Program. Under the original projections, mitigation fee revenue was projected to grow on average 8.59% over the life of the program. However, the current projections anticipate a 3% average growth rate, much lower than the original projections. Using only the portion of sales tax revenue allocated monthly to the authority's capital program, the revenue projections support issuing an additional $61.1 million in bond debt in fiscal year 2020. The new debt, along with current and expected cash flows, will be the basis for funding the authority's capital program moving forward. I know there is a lot of information in the documents I provided you today, and expect you may have some follow-up questions. I'd like to answer any you may have this morning.
Director Gatewood. Okay. We're punching the wrong numbers.
Okay. Yeah.
Director Natoli.
Yeah. Just to follow on to the revenue assumptions that were handed at our place today, is there a similar chart that does the look back since the approval of Measure A, so we can see what that historical trend has been? Is that information available to us?
And you're looking for their previously approved projections?
Yeah. No, I'm looking for not what just what projections were. I'm looking for what the realities were in those years.
Yes, that information is available, and I can get that to you.
Okay, if you could, because I think it would then give us, recognize that we were working off of projections. We now know what happened from 2008 through 2016 at least. And
yes,
could you just give me generally then what was the trend for all those years?
Yeah, so if in comparison to our original estimates, including the actuals since the beginning of the program, for sales tax revenue, the actual growth rate, including the projections I've given you today, is 3.76% for the sales tax revenue, and for the development fees, the mitigation fees, it's 5.72%.
Because the revelation in the documents, as you've updated them, are that what this body's been acting upon, based upon what was provided to us through whatever reports, is that we were on a course that if we'd looked at actuals, recognizing that this, the life of the program is decades, but that in actuality over the last 10 plus years, it's been 3.7%. Is that what I heard you say on the sales tax?
Yeah, it's 3.76. That includes the projections that we've provided you today. So it's looking at the program as a whole, including actuals through this year and then projections moving forward.
Okay, so what are the actuals standing alone? What were the actuals?
I don't have that percentage on average in front of me.
Certainly wasn't 8% though.
No.
And I think that's, again, certainly I credit, Norm and you and others who've, brought this to us. Obviously, it's the basis for discussion today, but this board, I'm going to be very frank about it, I don't think was served very well in that if we were working on projections that had that long term, recognizing that they were adopted by this board at a point in time, or at least presented to us, that, you know, here and now, obviously we're going to have to true this up, and it's good that we're doing this now rather than 10 years from now. But if in actuality we were tracking along and still using those projections for whatever reason, and we're chewing them up, again, it's good that we're bringing this here, and I can compliment you, Norman, and others for bringing this to us. But I think it's important for frame of reference as we talk about this, though, that we have the actuals built in to any chart that we get in the future, so I would ask for that. Right. And again, the numbers are what they are, and we're going to have to obviously grapple with that today and in future times. But I appreciate certainly the truing up and the forthrightness which you bring this to us, because it sounds like that in the past, for whatever reason, we didn't have, not only, we may have had actuals year to year, but there was no truing up over the last 10 plus years. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yes, not on a long-term basis.
Okay, very good. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Dr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given the update here, but also I think that our executive director has been updating board members. I know I got an update about sort of previous expenditures and the revenue forecasts. It seems like at one of our meetings soon we have to figure out what to do with the revenues versus the projected revenues and the expenditures that were made based on projected revenues, and how we're going to true that up. It seems like a very big issue that we're going to have to confront fairly soon. And I know that this staff report doesn't really cover all of that, but I do think that's the essence of this, is that there's been less money coming in than we've been projecting, and we're spending on a projected rate for the past 10 years. So, you know, it underscores the need for a supplemental measure potentially, but also underscores the need to really continuously update this and use actuals rather than projections. I know we've bonded out much of the expenditures that we've done, and that's part of why we're somewhat locked in. And Norm, I just want to applaud you for going through all of this, making sure that we're updated, but also trying to shift projects to a pay-go basis to help save interest costs, because that is a critical strategy that we're going to have to continue to employ going forward.
Thank you. That is our plan going forward, is that on an annual basis that we will review all the data that we have and make running changes to our expenditure plans as we go along, so that we don't get into the situation where we kind of fall behind in making and chewing it up. So.
Dr. Frost.
So kind of along those same lines, the revenue assumptions here don't include the capital plan moving forward, and it seems like based on what we know, our projections are not looking good for those who are supposed to receive their funding later on in the Measure A cycle. In fact, they may not be able to, they may not receive their funding, or some of us may have to reevaluate our capital plans and what is most important, because we may not be able to accomplish all of our capital improvement plans. Is it possible, because in the past we had the capital allocation worksheet that showed the net amount at the end of the Measure A. It year by year gave us an overview. Is it possible to get all the information so that we can kind of see where we're headed and what we're looking at?
Well, I have several thoughts on that. One is that some of the work that I've been doing so far has really been to make sure that the authority is on solid ground over the next 3 to 5 years. That's the primary focus. The other part of it is that there's a much longer view of this, to the end of Measure A in 2039 that we need to look at. We have an opportunity in 2019 to reevaluate our expenditure plan. That's the 10-year mark of Measure A. That's our first opportunity to actually go back and revise the plan, to update it and revise it. But keep in mind that the expenditure plan that is in Measure A, that was adopted in 2004. So in 2019, that will have been 15 years. So that will be a 15-year-old plan that has not been changed. And so in 2019, when we have that opportunity, it will be a significant opportunity for us to take into consideration the changes in the landscape, the expenditures and where they've gone, and recalibrating the projects and the expenditures going forward, knowing that we have a reduced revenue stream. So I think that's what we tried to do here, was just to show what our new revenues look like, to give you a first look at that. I think it's going to be a later discussion because we have that 2019 opportunity to relook at everything, and this is just one part of it.
Well, in the past, there have been times when, someone was shovel-ready and ready to go, and we made decisions, let's just give them their money because they're ready to go, and we're not quite, and we didn't think anything of that. But now, allocating, a large amount of funding to one person early on could mean they get the money and the rest don't. And so now, it kind of, 3 to 5 years doesn't tell what we really need to know when we're making these decisions on who gets the money when they get it. I mean, if we're going to really think about truing it up, throughout the course of Measure A, which I think is in the spirit of the law, as long as we true it up by the end, well, at the end, how will we true it up if we don't have the revenues? So 3 to 5 years doesn't tell us the whole story.
No, it definitely does not.
It's not enough.
Yeah. No, the 3 to 5 year look was just to make sure that we can get to 2019 when we have the opportunity to do the major reset. And but yes, there were definitely a lot of considerations to.
I mean, the Capital Connector, the last 3 years of Measure A, they get, $8 million and $25 million, and a lot of their money comes at the last minute. What's going to happen to them if there's no more money? I want to make sure we get that money because that project is important. So I think we need the whole picture annually. Or, we need to I'm glad we're visiting it in 2019, but I wish we could visit it sooner.
We'll actually get
we're
another.
making decisions today.
You'll get another extended look in the spring when we bring our next cycle of capital contracts, and that will force us to do another evaluation, and we'll extend the term.
I mean, and thank goodness for you guys. You've done a great job. I appreciate everything you've done to help bring clarity to all of us. Just saying, I feel concerned about today's decisions when tomorrow, it may impact tomorrow, many years down the road.
Thank you.
Director Swin.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks, Norm, I want to echo a lot of the sentiments that were said earlier. In regards to the projections, because so much has been made because of what happened last time, and I know it's difficult to have a crystal ball looking so far into the future, but I wanted to dive into this a little bit because it's also not intuitive to me that we could expect to be so consistent in our growth rates over such a long period of time. So I was wondering a couple of things regarding Beacon Economics, Beaconomics. A couple of things if you could go into. One, confirm that they didn't do the projections that that happened last time, and two, maybe we can talk briefly about what goes into their assumptions, given that inflation right today isn't even at 3%, yet they're assuming a growth rate, a trend that seems to be influenced by inflation and just the surrounding local economy. Again, it's counterintuitive that you could expect such a consistent rate over time with no dip in the economy for the next 20 years. So that's a couple of things you could address.
Yeah, so I worked with Beacon Economics fairly closely, and the growth rate that's represented in this worksheet are growth rates that have been smoothed out for the peaks and valleys in the revenue stream. And so what you're seeing is an average, and as you'll notice, the further out you go, the smoother it gets, and that's because of the further out you go, the more difficult those projections are to make, but they include recessions and the peaks and valleys in the revenue flow, and smooth it out with an average ratio.
Thank you. And then again, who did the projections for the last? Wasn't Beacon Economics correct?
Pineapple.
I guess that's the more important question.
Yeah, I think Pineapple Group did the last projections.
Okay, thank you.
You don't have to use assumptions.
Director Howell.
Just following along with some of the previous comments, I think where we really are now is that we had projections, revenue projections that were completely ludicrous given what was going on in the economy, and it was never brought to our attention. And we just need to be more diligent about looking at the numbers on an annual basis. And when they need to be adjusted up, down, or whatever we need to do that. And hopefully that will ultimately, at the end of Measure A, get us to the point where everybody that needs revenue is going to get at least some of it, if not all of it. So I think that's where we are right now. And I just applaud the staff for the Herculean effort that you guys went through to dig up this dirt and try to get it fixed.
Yeah, this is our first step towards a long-term project to true up the revenues, the projections with the capital allocation plan. And that's going to be an endeavor that'll take probably a good part of next year to complete.
Director Harris.
Thank you, Chair.
Got it. Norm, is it fair to say that as projections have evolved over the last few years that debt service wasn't taken into account, in terms of the projects and the costs and projected revenues? When I looked at those numbers, I wasn't seeing an allocation for debt service. So is that one reason why we're kind of coming up short at this point?
What I can tell you is that debt service in the 30-year early action plan is not reflected in that plan. However, when we look at the last plan of finance that was performed for the STA, which was last updated in 2009, was it 2000? In 2009, it shows, so the early action plan shows $1.4 billion in capital projects. But the 2009 plan of finance showed that that the capital program should have had $2.1 million.
2.1 in expenditures.
Yes, 2.1 in expenditures. And so I think there's that gap between the 1.4 and the 2.1 that is for debt service. That's not reflected in the spreadsheet. And so that is just my speculation that that's where the debt service was. But regardless, when we look at the 1.4 billion to what we know now, we're still not comparing apples to apples, and so it's not a good number to use. So I think in the sense of what you're asking, for practical purposes, the debt service is not in there, and that could be responsible for a lot of the shortfall that we're seeing.
So obviously moving forward, we need to have that clearly delineated, for all of our discussions. It needs to be, part of the spreadsheet and made clear that that's part of what we're dealing with. I think that was a great oversight, and it got sort of lost in the discussion. So moving forward, we have to keep that in mind because it's a significant piece of the puzzle.
Yes, definitely.
And I would also like to laud you on the work that you've done to sort of rebuild the figures over the last few years and present to this board, a dose of reality that I think has been a long time needed.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to point out that in the Attachment A, that large format document I provided to you, in column H, we've spelled out exactly by year the amounts that are required under the ordinance to be withheld for the capital program, which includes debt service and pay-as-you-go funding, and that amounts to $783 million in this projection here. So that'd be column H in Attachment A. So we are moving in that direction.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, one other comment is that our bond covenants require that our bond program gets the first bite of the Measure A funds, and so it should definitely be at the top of every expenditure that we look at. In fact, some of the preliminary work that I've done, the very first line is actually debt service. And then, because that's what our bond covenants require, after that, then we get to fund the remainder of our capital programs. But you're right, it should be shown, it should be up front.
Director Fox.
As Chair so eloquently pointed out, I'm the new guy on the staff here, so a couple of things, though, that bother me extensively, and thank you, Norm, for talking to me about this, is number one, over the life of this measure, there's been an extended period of time in which the monitoring of the expenditures was not there. And there were $40 million more that went out to job sites that they probably shouldn't have, thus leaving a significant number of us with projects that are in progress now that cannot be completed. Over the 3-year period, we may not have the money to do those unless some changes are made. The purpose of my point here is, unless there's some assurances, and I'm very pleased at what you have done so far, but we need to have some assurances, or at least I do, that we're going to see an ongoing monitoring of the monies that are going out, that they're going where they're supposed to be, and that those who are progressing according to their maintenance schedules and plans do not get left short at the end of the program. And when I look at the differences between the projections and where we are, and then I look at the outgoing funds that were paid over and above what was originally allotted for, I have to say there's a problem in the mix. And my hope is that in all of this discussion about actuals and projections and where we were and where we're going, I hope we have included in that some very stringent monitoring of where we are and some very stringent reporting back to this board of why we're there and where we are going to be able to go. Those are the things that I think are necessary if we're going to avoid this conflict again. And there's several of us up here who jurisdictionally are significantly down the ladder on gaining funds in order to complete projects we already have scheduled and ready, and are going on, but we're not going to be able to do that now because of these changes in funding. So it's that monitoring and that reporting back to this board that I hope to see on a more regular basis, and not over 10 years, nothing coming out, or the last 2 years, nothing coming out.
That is definitely our plan going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Carr.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question's along the same line with a different slant. The 8% obviously didn't happen in actuality. What assumptions were made when they came up with that 8%? And what could this board have done, or the boards that approved that projection, to be more critical of those assumptions?
I think one thing to keep in mind is that when the plan of finance was done in 2006, it was still in the mid-2000s building boom, and I think I think that played a lot into it. As far as how they came up with the other numbers, I can't speak to. Do you?
Yeah, so I guess a general comment is that where the original was the diff in the part of the, yeah. So there were a couple of problems with the original projections in addition to the 8.59%. In the original projections, the first year of development impact fees were anticipated to be 8.8 million, when in actual they were 3 million. And so there was a fundamental, I guess, assumption that the building activity back in the 2000s was going to continue. And so I think that's in part the reason for it. But secondly, on an actual basis, looking at the actual inflows of the impact fees, we're seeing that those impact fees are extremely volatile. For example, they decreased as much as 24% in one given year, and in last year, 2016-17, they were up 80%. And when you have and primarily the city of Sacramento was responsible for that, but when you have volatility to that extent in a program, a fee program, then it's an indication that that's very difficult to make assumptions for a program that has that kind of volatility.
So I guess it just points out the issue of it's not just the projections, it's the assumptions that underpin those projections. And if we aren't provided that information, it's hard for this board or any board to make a reasonable approval of those things. So even with the projection that we have at 3%, as a board member, I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. What assumptions are we making to come up with that? And what are the volatilities that the board needs to be aware of if we're going to move ahead just with those projections?
Yeah, part of that information can be found in their Beacon Economics report that I included with our packet. It has some of the underlying assumptions, both nationally and on a local basis. And there's a lot more detail in addition to the report, but the report is a summary of some of the indicators that our contractor used to develop these expectations, these projections.
I'll also say that so after we receive those projections, we also vetted them among staffs, and we also passed them through to our financial advisors for them to review as well. So I think for what we have currently, we're very comfortable with them. But like I said, this is something that we will evaluate on an annual basis.
Dr. Howell.
Just to Director Carr's point, in defense of our staff, neither of these gentlemen were involved in the 8%. There was a lot of smoke and mirrors going on, apparently for quite a long time. So I just want anybody who's watching this to understand that, thank goodness, they discovered this. They didn't contribute to it, and I don't want them to have to make an attempt to defend what was done because it was just flat out wrong and it shouldn't have happened.
Recognize that, and probably hardly any members were on this board at that time. When
I was one of them.
Recognize that.
Also keep in mind that the 8.59%, that is only in the development impact fee program. That was not part of the sales tax projections. So.
Okay, I see no other requests to speak. I will say Director Howell beat me to the punch in that, the two gentlemen that are here today, along with, I thank the members of the subcommittee on the budget who, we dove deep into the weeds on a lot of this. It frankly hasn't been done before, or in a long time anyway, and I will say that there is more transparency and more relevance when it comes to numbers than has been seen before. So thank you very much. Sometimes medicine is difficult to take, but we're taking it, so appreciate your work. Madam Clerk.
Okay. Your next item is item number 8, SB1 Local Partnership Program, allocation of formula shares.
Senate Bill 1, also known as SB 1, was signed into existence by the governor just earlier this year. It created a number of transportation programs to be funded primarily by the gas tax and by the diesel fuel tax and by new vehicle license fees. It's administered by the California Transportation Commission, or CTC. One of the new programs is called the Local Partnership Program. The Local Partnership Program is a $200 million a year program meant specifically to reward self-help counties such as Sacramento, whose voters voted to tax themselves to improve their own transportation systems. So the LPP is really for counties just like Sacramento. And because of Measure A, that makes us eligible for the LPP funding. The Local Partnership Program is further divided into, so it's one program under SB1, but it's been further divided into two separate programs. One of those is called the Competitive Grants Program. The Competitive Grants Program is going to be the subject of your December 14th and your January 11th meetings. That's not what we're talking about today. Today, we are talking about the Formula Shares Program, which is the other half of the Local Partnership Program. Like the name implies, the Formula Shares Program is distributed statewide to agencies by a formula. The formula is very, very complicated and includes population, lane miles, revenue, tolls, and so forth. And so when we were trying to project how much was coming to Sacramento County, it was very, very difficult because we were going up against jurisdictions that had toll bridges and toll roads. The amount could have been anywhere from $3 million to $20 million that we could have allocated, or could have been more or less. Mm-hmm. The number that I had thrown out there was that we could expect $7 million. And in just about 3 weeks ago, the CTC released the formula shares, and we're very, very close to that number. It came in at $6.983 million. Now, since the STA is the taxing authority for Measure A in Sacramento County, they have designated us as the body that's going to help them program funding in Sacramento County. So the list of projects that are eligible it's somewhat strict and somewhat limited. For example, it can go towards construction and acquisition, but not towards operations or administration. Projects have to be fully funded, but the monies that are provided through SB1, they cannot supplant any funds that are already programmed to a project. SB1 funds must be matched 1-for-1 with local funds, and all allocations have to be requested before June 30th of 2019. Contracts have to be awarded 6 months after that, within 6 months after that, and completion has to be accomplished 6 months after that. So the timelines are very, very strict. And I think their goal in creating these specific eligibility requirements is because they wanted new projects. They wanted jurisdictions to come up with new projects to put them together so that they could be funded and put on the streets very, very quickly. They didn't want their program to be dusting off old projects on the shelf that were just looking for additional monies. So I think that was the intent. So knowing that those were the restrictions, the staff report recommendation is to allocate $1.3 million to regional transit. They would use that money to purchase new buses to expand their circulator bus system. The remainder would then be allocated to all of the cities based on a formula of population and lane miles. We know that for the most part, the cities and the county would like to use their money for road rehab or other road-type projects, including curb ramps and pavement sealing. So that's the package before you. One last note, just for your consideration, is that we will be doing this again in August, but this time for the 2019-20 fiscal year. At that point, I think that my best guess is that that amount will be $5 million. But just for the board to keep in mind that this is not the only time that we're doing this. We have another opportunity in August, and hopefully every August after that. So that concludes the staff report. Thank you.
Director Hanson. If you have questions of staff, I'd rather do that first, and then we'll go to public comment. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Director Frost, do you have questions of Mr. Hom regarding his report?
Pardon me? Yes. My question is, I was not in on the committee meetings. I know SB1 is called the Road Repair Act, and I know how my constituents have reacted to the tax increase, and the only consolation is roads are going to get repaired. And so I'm wondering how RT is in the mix when that's not road repair.
It is called the Road Repair and Accountability Act, but within the local partnership program, rolling stock for transit replacement is actually specifically added to the program by the CTC. So I think there is some intent at the state level that it would fund transit was eligible.
But I thought there was a separate package for regional for transit. I thought they were receiving their own part of SB1. And that this is for road repair.
This is, so there are a number of projects under SB1, and I'm not familiar with the other projects. The ones that I am familiar with is just a local partnership program, because that is the STA's program. And so within those guidelines, it does specifically allow for transit rolling stock replacement and other transit, because it is a transportation enhancement.
And is this a new program that RT is starting up, or do they have ongoing funding for this, or will they be back next year needing more funding to continue the new program? How does it?
I think probably RT staff is better equipped to answer that question, but my understanding is that this is an expansion of existing service to reach underserved areas that currently do not have service.
And so I just want to express that I think I kind of think SB1 is for fixing roads, And are you here to respond to the question regarding RT?
Only to, yeah, well, I'm Mark Lonergan, Deputy General Manager at Regional Transit, and I can expand on our plans for the 1.3 million allocation to RT if you would like.
I just really want to know.
The chair recognizes Mr. Lonergan.
Okay, so
I think what I would like to know is, because this is for a program, do you have money to continue the program, or is this just a startup of a program?
So there's no operating funding in this at all. This is just acquiring additional buses for us to do more neighborhood circulators. And the buses that we would purchase under this program, we would have the operating funding to operate for a time, to the extent that operating funding is still an issue for us. It would be multiple years that we could sustain this at our current budget.
Thank you. So I feel kind of strongly about this, that SB1 should go to fix roads, and so I would like to make a motion that the package submitted by staff be approved excluding RT, because I believe that there is such a backlog of roads that need to be fixed that the funds should go to fix the roads for all of our agencies.
Yeah, just one.
And that's I made a motion.
Okay, we have a motion on there. Is there a second? What? Is there a second? Okay, thank you. Member Hanson.
Thank you. I had deferred speaking because I wanted to save my comments for after the public testimony, but Ms. Frost, I think you hit at an issue that's important to me, and I have a somewhat different take. So I was going to ask a few questions of the executive director. Ms. Dahl, you got married, sorry.
No, Bishop.
Bishop now. Can you put that chart up? And I'm going to hand out to the board something that I requested from Norm, and he's provided, which is a comparison of Measure A expenditures versus what's being decided today. I'll hand out the chart for the board. And this came up because the staff recommendation really confused me. And Norm, I'll ask you in a second to explain the process that gave us the staff recommendation, but really clearly what shows to me is that we're not respecting the Measure A formula in this allocation. This is going to be an annual formula allocation, and SB1, yes, primarily focused on roads, but also dealt with transit. Each jurisdiction with roads also gets its own share of SB1 in addition to the self-help county share. And I think your staff report lays out the competitive grant program and the formula program. But based on the formula that the voters adopted, we decided to invest 34.5% into transit. But this allocation only gives 13.5% roughly to transit. So after I met with Norm last week and got briefed, I asked for this information. I got it yesterday. Thank you for sending it. And then I called Regional Transit and I spoke to the general manager, Henry Lee, who's here. And I said, Henry, what's going on? Because I am flabbergasted that we would short Regional Transit by $1 million. And so Norm, why don't you explain the process by which we got to this allocation number? Because it, to me, doesn't make sense.
The process started with me convening a working group of staffs of the, basically the public works directors and staffs of all of the local agencies plus Regional Transit. And my goal at that time was to create a consensus staff recommendation that I could present to the board, because for one thing, I mean, the STA has no horse in this race. What I was trying to do was to get a staff consensus. So when we convened for the first time, I had put together several options for us to mull over. One of them was actually according to the Measure A formula strictly, where RT would get 34.5%, and then the other agencies would split it based on road miles and population. I had also presented another scenario where we would look at our current needs, address the most current needs, but then look at it in a broad term over a course of 7, 8, 9 years, where over the course of that time, each of the local agencies would get their proportionate share. I think there is concern not only at the CTC, but just among our staffs, that we're unsure of the long-term future for SB1. And so the idea was that we would go on a percentage basis for the initial round, which is this round here, to ensure that if something were to happen with SB1, that all of the agencies would have at least gotten their initial share. And then we would take a look at this again in future years after the 2018 election. And so we had, so the staffs had bantered about several different options. We had talked about several different things. And we had ultimately, everyone had basically come to an agreement of a formula allocation where regional transit would receive $1 million. And then that was, so the RTA request was subsequently amended for an additional $1.3 million. That was presented back to the working group at a second meeting. And at that point, we could not get consensus on anything except what we had previously looked at, which was the $1 million plus splitting it out. I then presented an alternative, which was to give RT $1.3 million, and what that would do, it would address, of regional transit's two needs, the $1.3 million would address their most serious need, which was for the transit for the buses. And then, but it would not fund their $1 million for their station improvements. And I saw that as a compromise, hoping that the group would be able to move forward with that. Ultimately, everyone in the group, they did not voice their support, but they also agreed that they would not oppose it. And so that's where we ended up. So
my concern is that our public works directors, and we all serve in capacities for the cities or the counties respectively, that's a different fiduciary duty than the one we have here, which is to the voters of Sacramento County as a whole, and ultimately to implement the Measure A program as a self-help county. So as these funds come in through SB1 to reward self-help counties, in some ways I'm disappointed that in a room the public works directors essentially decided to shortchange regional transit in favor of our cities and the county, because ultimately regional transit is a benefit, and the program here doesn't seem to really help the city. It really helps the unincorporated county and some of the other areas where service is less prevalent. And we've heard consistently from members of the community and elected officials in those areas that that is a very important service to add. We even had a proposal here about the neighborhood shuttle service, and I'm guessing that we will continue to try to expand that service, but I don't see supporting something that sets right out of the gate of SB1 a funding formula that's not fair. And I ultimately believe that that process wasn't fair. This is a policy decision of the board. I respect the public works directors, but I still believe that SB1 will survive. I believe that we're setting a precedent here, and as such, unlike Director Frost, who I have utmost respect for, I would make a contrary motion that we fully fund, according to the Measure A formula, the agencies based on the third section of your chart here, but that as part of this, we could essentially adopt today's recommendation, but over a 3 to 5 year period, we true up those allocations so we make up for it over a rolling period, so that the work that's been done is not in vain. We respect what sounds like somewhat a compromise, but that ultimately we keep the promises we made to the voters to fund transit and to provide service to those who either we don't want to drive because they create air pollution, or don't have cars and still need to get to work and school and church. So that's my motion. I can restate it if necessary. All right, so
yes.
My motion is that we, as a board, set a policy that we use.
Keep in mind, we do have one card for public comment, and we have other board members, but go ahead.
I understand. Yeah. That we make a motion, or that I'm making a motion to adopt the Measure A allocation formula for the purposes of the SB1 formula program, and that even though we have a proposal today that doesn't fund according to the Measure A program, that over let's say over a 5-year basis, we hit that target, so that everyone has a chance to fairly compete, but that we also keep our promises to the voters through Measure A, which does allocate 34.5% to transit. Everybody has deferred maintenance. Everybody needs help, but it should not be at the expense of one agency over the others.
So that was the truncated motion.
Well, I said 5 years, and we do that on a rolling basis. We will, even though the allocation, so it has to true up to the Measure A formula over a 5-year period. So you'd average over 5 years. Yeah, you'd use the Measure A split to judge whether or not over 5 years we've had those appropriate expenditure splits between the jurisdictions. So basically, at the end of the 5-year period, regional transit will achieve about 34.5%, and the other jurisdictions receive their proportional share per the Measure A formula.
So the proportions, the table that you handed out, the third table would be the proportions, is what you're saying?
Yes. This is only a 1-year version, right. But yes.
Right. Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Second by Director Chenier. Okay, it's on the table. We still, now thank you, Director Hansen, you've lit up my board here. We now have Director Natoli.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since I punched in, some of the conversation has answered some of my questions, and again, I appreciate that members of the board already know where they're at, and I think we had a staff recommendation, and certainly we now have a motion on the floor, but I wanted to ask of Norm, as it goes back to not only the process, you explained that was part of the background I wanted to ask about, but as it relates to self-help counties, was there any guidance as it came out of the legislation, not that I would necessarily look there for guidance, but that if you had an existing measure, again, I appreciate the call to maintain our adherence to the promise made to the voters, and certainly that's something I think we all keep in mind here, but was there any, in the legislation, direction around that, that you could either exceed or not in any of the categories, or was it pretty much left open to the local jurisdiction, i.e. in this case the Transportation Authority, to make that determination?
It is the latter. They gave the local jurisdictions a lot of latitude in terms of how we actually ended up allocating the funding.
Okay. And then to the point about us being here now looking to August of 2018, and you estimated another $5 million allocation, again, obviously SB1 and what may happen either with an initiative drive or not. But assuming that it stands, then would that be a fairly annualized approach, or would it be every 6 months? What's your take on that, Norm?
So the next August allocation process is definitely going to happen, but it will be dependent on what happens in November 2018. If SB1 stands, this will be an annual process in the month of August. Now the reason that I came up with that $5 million estimate was because this initial allocation includes 2 fiscal years, but keeping in mind that this current fiscal year that we're in, the gas tax did not actually start until November 1st. And so it's actually it's a partial year plus a full year. So, but going forward, it will be on an annual basis for the next fiscal year starting in August. And so I came up with a $5 million estimate. Okay. And if it stands, it'll be $5 million plus whatever growth there is over the coming years. So
speak to the motion that's on the floor then, so over a 5-year period, I guess, going forward, if I take the motion, at least as I understand it, then we would be looking at a sum total, assuming SB1 stands and the allocations are consistent with some growth, somewhere in the $25 plus or
Yes.
minus $1 million
Yes.
range over that 5-year period?
That's correct.
And with the motion then, if you use the strict calculation of the percentages, then going into that for the next 4.5 years beyond, starting at least with the regional transit piece of this, we'd be at have to make up for about $1,100,000. Is that right? Or $1,100,000, $1,150,000. Is that right? Over that period of time, assuming, again, I'm not. I just want to make sure I'm correct on that number. I see heads nodding yes, so that would be the target. So, okay. All right, thank you.
One more thing, if I could throw it out, and it just occurred to me.
Sure.
So this is the initial funding round. CTC has indicated that they would like to revisit their split between the formula shares program and the competitive shares program in about 3 years. And the battle that we had been fighting almost all summer was the proportion of that. Currently, the formula is 50% in the competitive pot, 50% in the formulas pot. We would like to push that to 95% in the formulas pot. And I think there's a lot of movement towards that because that's how Prop 1B, the old Prop 1B was structured. 95% of the funding was allocated by formula. If that were to happen, the pot that would be coming to Sacramento County for programming would almost double.
Okay.
But that's a possibility. We don't know if that's going to happen or not, but that's looking out in 2 to 3 years.
If I could, Mr. Chair, just on that point then, I guess to the motion that's on the floor, if that were to happen, again, the arguments might be very well the same as we heard here this morning, countervailing approaches to motions. I guess I would like the opportunity, and I trust we would have that, if we made some commitment on the motion here today, at least the opportunity to visit that, because again, if that does happen over a 3-year period and goes to all formula, it may very well match with policy direction that is contemplated in the motion here today, but it certainly changes the amount of money and the significance of projects at any given time and deliverables and so forth, and so I guess I would just point that out certainly to the maker of the motion and those who have seconded it, that if that happens, I'd like to certainly have that a policy discussion, kind of the framework by which we'd approach that, because it might be a leveling out over a much greater period of time. I guess I would just put that more forward. Thanks.
Okay, because of a scheduling issue, I'm going to allow Director Cerna to jump the line.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief. Unfortunately, I have a plane to catch, and I'm going to barely make it as is. A question for you, Norm. How time sensitive is it to have a vote today?
It's very time sensitive. If the agencies have already put together their funding packages, which is down to the dollar and by projects, these applications are due to CTC next Friday. And so if there were any changes to what has already been done, the staffs would have to redo their nomination packets, get them back to me. I'd have to package them all together and then submit it to CTC by next Friday.
Okay. This is going to be very unorthodox, but I have an alternate in Nick Avdis, and I've actually sent him a text to come and play the part of Phil Cerna here for the ongoing discussion. I know you have, Mr. Chair, you have a number of board members in the queue to speak, so I think by the time you probably get to the middle of that list, Mr. Avdis ought to be here to participate. So forgive me, but I was hoping we'd get to a vote a little sooner. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Council, is there any issue with that?
With the alternate?
Yeah.
No, as long as he's here when you vote, as long as he understands the motion and is brought up to speed.
I've been trying to keep him up to speed on the motion. So, all right.
And if he understands the motion, he's a better man than I. Director Gatewood.
Okay, since I don't understand anything that just happened, I'm gonna need to. I need someone that can speak English to break it down for me. So we're gonna take money away from all the cities fixing the potholes to give it to RT, but we're gonna do it over 5 years, maybe with rolling numbers if the bill is not subjected to being revoked. That could happen within the next 3 months, but you need to have a vote today. Did I break it? Is that pretty much it?
I think the vote on SB1 will actually happen in November 2018, so it's,
okay.
It's not 3 months.
So, but is the rest of the other part right?
I think so.
No.
No?
We're not taking it away from we're not taking it away from the cities. We're over time guaranteeing that RT will get a minimum, is my understanding.
No, that's not correct.
Well, excuse me.
I guess none of us understand.
I'm just gonna put it back
Please
on.
punch in if you're going to speak. We have a long list of speakers. So. Director Gatewood still has the floor.
Does someone know that answer?
Maybe, Norm, can you and I just check and see if we understand? Because my understanding is that the motion says for this allocation right now, we will distribute based on the Measure A allocation, the third table.
No. No, the first table, which is the staff recommendation for this allocation, but make it up over time.
Oh, okay.
So that it essentially works out that the allocation is matches the Measure A formula.
After 5 years.
Even
after 5 years, yeah. So we would adopt the recommendation today so Norm can meet his deadline.
Got it.
But true it up over the 5-year period.
We're just going with this thing. We're not changing it.
Yeah, okay. But it trues it up over the 5-year period.
Got it. So we're not changing anything for today. It's just in 5 years, the money will shore up to make a better calculation that matches what originally came, the intent.
Permanent?
I think that would be at the discretion of the board. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Is it permanent? Oh, okay. So we're going to vote on it every time?
Yeah, I heard you say set a policy.
Set a policy, and it's the board's policy.
But not mandatory.
Well, we would have to evaluate that over time, but I think it sets a precedent to do it this way.
Okay, I'm just going to roll back.
Binding precedent? I'm going to try and nail you down here.
Our council knows very well that this board cannot bind a future board on a policy issue. So, no, it is ultimately a policy, and it's at the discretion of the board to later change that, but I believe it's an important policy in keeping faith with the voters who chose this Measure A allocation formula.
Okay, I think I got it. So.
Council good?
Yes.
Okay.
Too many lawyers.
Mr. Gatewood.
Okay.
You still have the floor.
Okay, cool. Just really quick, I'm sure it's just because I'm with him. We've been here 2 times. So it's a policy that we're now setting that we will try to shore up the numbers, but we're going to re-review the numbers every time just in case we don't like that we're shoring up correctly. Pretty bad. Okay.
Got it. Director Hume.
Thank you.
Sir.
Nick, welcome. And if you can get up to speed on this, you're a better man than the chair and myself. So, first of all, just with no disrespect to my colleagues that transgressed this, I think it's poor governance to put a motion on the floor before you have director comments, before you hear comments from the public, and kind of jump ahead of the process here.
But it's strictly Robert's Rules allows it.
It is allowed. I'm not saying it's not out of order.
Right.
But that being said, I think it's unnecessary and perhaps even erroneous to conflate Measure A funds with SB1 funds. They are 2 separate colors of money. They are not tied to each other. They do not have to follow the same formula allocation. And to Ms. Frost's point, and also from what I've heard from my constituency, these funds, which are not popular and do potentially run the risk of being revoked at a future election, are intended to go towards road repair and maintenance. And so when you're taking money out of that, and to Mr. Gatewood's point, it would take money from jurisdictions to give to RT, you take money from those jurisdictions doing the maintenance that these gas taxes is intended to fund, and putting that towards RT, I think you're further aggravating the wound of these folks that are paying these taxes. And now I sit on the RT board, as many of us do, and so I understand that RT could use the money, that deserves the money, serves a great function, but I'm saying these funds themselves and how they're generated and the purpose for which the bill stated they were intended to be done is not the same as Measure A and does not have to be conflated with that formula. So to the extent I understand the motion on the floor, I would not support it.
Director Chenier.
Thank you. So I am going to support this. I think that we have some precedent of what folks in the region are about. We will also, there's a lot of other variables that are going to come with us, right? If we come back on another transportation tax next year or 2020, that's going to affect us. So I just want to be clear, as Mr. Hansen said, we cannot bind future boards. So whatever policy we may or may not adopt today can be turned over next week or the following year or any time after that. I do think that looking out over a number of years and looking at public transit and what that can do for this region, particularly in light of, for example, the study mission we did in Austin and looking at their infrastructure or lack of infrastructure and what we need as a community long-term to continue to grow. Regional transit is going to be playing, I hope, as it improves itself, which it's on the right path, an increasingly important role in the economic success. So I think we can look a little bit larger about what the needs of our region are, or what the needs of the county is, than just looking at this as a straight, gas tax. We need to fix potholes. We definitely need that. We all have roads that are in dire needs. There's no question about it. But I think this is an appropriate time to send a message that we are looking at the long term, we're looking at our environment, and we're looking at the infrastructure that will need to be an economic success in the future. So I am going to support this. I don't know if it'll have the votes, but I think we need to and should have a continuing kind of policy discussion around that issue of, what are our priorities over time here, and how do we actualize what this county needs, what we need as a region to make sure that we're economically successful. Again, the most striking thing to me about our visit to Austin was the lack of transportation, lack of public transportation, and I think the city will implode at some point. That's all we heard everywhere we went, and I know a lot of people. I used to live there. I know a lot of people who live there. It's all they talked about was how they can't get around town. So we have an opportunity to begin to fix that. My understanding on these monies from Mr. Lee, Mr. Lonigan, is this is really to serve underserved areas. So these are not monies that will be used downtown in the core where we have good service. It will be used in places where there are no buses today. I think we have made some commitments to some of the unincorporated areas in the county to make sure we get transportation there. So again, this allows us to take another step along that road over the next 5 years.
Director Fox.
Thank you. I've also met with both RT and with Norman, and I understand where you're coming from on your motion. However, I have to say that in current status, we have an RT system who have already told us that they can currently live and work with under the 1.3 mil that are in this, the first line of figures that you have, that there is a study underway that that RT is taking on their transit routes that include the unincorporated areas. I've complained to him extensively. RTs would like to get rid of me already because of my complaints regarding the bus service to Citrus Heights, North Sacramento, and Orangevale, servicing that northern corridor along I-80 from the RT station and over. But there's too many things I believe that we need to see first than to make a hasty decision today on a motion that ties the board to something that we may not be able to handle or do in the near future, when it has absolutely no, well, I won't say no bearing, when it has limited bearing and effect on where we need to go right now. I think RT has set forward a very strong program and argument about where they are, where they're going, and what they want to do, and their ability to hold off on other funding if necessary. I understand some of your reasoning for the motion, but I think it's premature, and it would not be proper at this time, and I could not support the motion as it is.
Director Harris.
Thank you, Chair. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty about SB1 and what the future holds for it. And I understand that with this current allocation, as in the first panel of figures, we might be able to get some immediate use for projects that are ready to go, much needed road improvements in the short term. That being said, I agree with everything that Director Chenier brought up about the direction of where we're going with public transit and how the region is changing and the need for RT to receive some of these funds because a component of SB1 is in fact transit. Now, Norm, could you clarify a little bit more about SB1, which aspect of it is dedicated to transit?
I cannot. There's a number of programs in SB1. I tend to only follow the local partnership program, but I know that there is a transit component of it, and perhaps someone else here can speak to that.
So we might be without SB1 in November 18, or we may in 3 years have twice as much money. Well, that's a pretty wide range of possibilities. So I think it's fair in this motion that the allocations that you worked hard to reach through compromise, with a lot of public works directors, and still retain some money for RT to buy buses, which serve outlying communities, makes a lot of sense to me. And also the policy piece to pull in transit. Just to set that as a policy direction, what I see is it gives you the tools when you have these negotiations annually, that as a policy direction by this board, that transit be given that kind of consideration. So with all the uncertainty, I see that this motion does no harm, potentially does some good, but that what we're trying to achieve today does get achieved. So I'll be in support.
Director Guerra.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Norm and your staff for getting to this point. I think the fact that we didn't have a policy directive and the timing of how, we want to be as effective as we can to get as much to our region. And I think that's what you've shown here today, is that you've done everything you could to get as much consensus as possible to get resources for our entire region. But the motion here, I think, addresses a starting point that has led to this bigger conversation, which is we want to give you some staff direction on kind of where we want to see. And even though SB1 and Measure A are two different issues, Measure A gives us a direction of where the voters felt about a proper allocation, even if it gets us at 5 years' point. So, I'll be supporting the motion. I think you've done a good job based on the lack of policy direction, and I think this is the beginning process of trying to find some policy direction of how to best do those allocations, as well as also us going back to our public works directors and making sure that we're showing what clearly our policy interests are when we come to these allocations. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll support the motion.
Okay, I want to remind everybody we do have one speaker slip in. Director Howell.
Was RT in the room during the discussion with the Public Works and Transportation staff members?
Yes.
If RT was in the room and RT's got a specific project, and your comments at the beginning of this agenda item were that it's got to be specific, very detailed cost estimates, then I'm going to go with what RT and the other jurisdictions agreed to. And I have no problem if we look at this annually, because we don't know what's going to happen with SB1 anyway, but I'm going to go with the original staff recommendation.
Director Peters.
Yes, thank you. I have been looking at this too, and my first thought was I thought $1.3 million was a little pricey for RT, and after I understood that the Public Works directors had agreed to it and RT had agreed to it, I kind of came around, and I think that what we're talking about here is setting a precedent to use Measure A as the formula, and I don't think it's appropriate to do that at a meeting where there's not enough information on the table about it, and that if we want to discuss it in the spring when things have settled maybe a little bit on SB1, but I'm with Director Hume, is that SB1 doesn't really have anything to do with Measure A. I understand the reasoning for going with that kind of a formula, but I don't agree that it necessarily works for this. I don't think that was the intent of the writers of the bill. And keeping in mind that buses need good roads also, and they drive on our roads, and the roads have to be in good shape to carry the buses. So I will not support the motion.
Director Swin.
Yeah, I just want to echo Director Howell and Director Peters' comments. You know, there was a lot of, I think, good work and effort into arriving to a compromise, and given the uncertainty of revenues right now and the ability for us to adopt another share allocation formula at a later date, I see no reason now to sway from what has been decided as in a group manner, bought off by RT. I recognize the importance of transit and RT's role in the region and what we must do. I think if we want to go that route, we should have another conversation specific to RT and how we can fund improvements in the future and implement a regional transit system. But for today, I will reject the motion and support the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Did you make a motion?
Director Hansen.
I just wanted, I think we're at the end of the debate, sort of. The only thing I was going to say, because Ms. Howell raised it, and we had very raucous debate here about Measure B and transit, and there's a consistent trend, and I think we need to have this before us as an actual action item if this doesn't pass today. But what is our policy towards fair share allocation? Regional transit was recognized by our voters as getting at least 34%, 34.5%. And here, because we represent all these different agencies, we're now forced to choose between our agencies and the common good, which RT represents. And I think that it's hard when it's like, okay, let's redistribute the sandwiches, and it's easy for the public works directors to some extent, not that they've been totally unfair, but to take regional transit's lunch away in that meeting, in those meetings. There's no doubt that it is at a competitive disadvantage in these staff meetings. Our board does not have a policy, and we will continue to fight about this because it's really important to the region. It's important to our voters, and it sets us up potentially for failure in 2020 on a subsequent measure. So I don't conceivably believe that my motion might pass right now, but I do believe that the comments of this board underscore the idea that we still don't see regional transit as an equal partner to our cities, and we have to fix that if we're going to have a functional economy, have less congestion and better air quality, and serve our public.
And the way this meeting is going, we're all going to miss lunch. Mr. Gatewood.
Can I request to hear from the speaker and the RT people?
No.
Okay, dang it. Never mind. Sorry.
Director Peters.
Well, back to lunch. I realize that was just a metaphor about sandwiches there, but I don't believe SB1 was about transit, and it was about roads, and I was at the rally, I discussed it at the CSAC meeting, we've had a lot of discussion about the quality of the roads, and recognizing that we all need a good transit system, but I don't believe that was what the maker of the bill had in mind. And I'm totally willing to have a discussion here in this boardroom because some of us aren't on the RT board, and we don't know what RT's policies are or how they're going to spend this money, whether this is a commitment to provide service. Do you have the money for the operating funds? There's just not enough time for us today to have an understanding of where it fits in. So I realize you represent the city of Sacramento, and so that's where your attention is, but there are a lot of points of view here, and I don't think that it's appropriate to denigrate those points of view by saying that we have to have that if we vote against it, that we're voting against clean air, etc.
Director Howell.
Just to address Director Hansen's point, to say that we had a raucous discussion here prior to Measure B would be an understatement. But at the end of the day, Measure B didn't pass. And I think it depends on who you talk to, because I've had people tell me there was way too much money for RT, and then other people said there was way too much money for roads. So I think it depends on where you were in the county, what people's opinion of that whole thing was. But the fact is, Measure B did not pass. So we didn't do everything right, or certainly not in the minds of John Q. Public. Having said that, if the Public Works directors and the transportation folks in the region, including RT, sat down, and Director Chenier has explained that he thinks that the $1.3 million is for 8 buses, that's what RT asked for. I don't know, unless they asked for 42 buses, and they agreed that it would only be 8. But if that's 8 buses that they have a detailed project estimate for, along with all of the other project estimates that the various public works and transportation departments put forward with regard to maintenance, and the project in Folsom, just for the record, is not simply rehab, it's actually road widening and bike lanes. So that's a little bit of a different, and I think we're the only one other than RT that's going to be spending it more on the capital side, I guess is the way to put it. But I have no problem with having a future discussion about should SB1 continue. We have a further discussion about it and getting input from all of our staffs. But as we sit here today, going back to Norm's introduction, we need to make a decision because this paperwork's got to go in next week. And so I'm still inclined to go with the staff recommendation and what all of the staffs in the region agreed to, and then we have a discussion about this again in the spring.
Let's vote, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to call on Director Fox.
Very quickly.
Yes.
Very quickly, I have to agree with Member Howell, because I think this type of motion is exactly what people don't like to see. It's last-minute things tossed out in the middle of a meeting that goes against what has been recommended and brought to us by staff in our work. I would rather say pull it off the table or vote it down, but let's take this concept to after the start of the year, get our staffs involved in it, working with bringing something together, and bring it back at a different time for planning. But I'm very opposed to doing it in this particular way. It's untimely. We do not have the information necessary to make a logical decision, and it's going to be difficult to explain to any of our constituents that this was a thoughtful, worked-out process when we have a very good project in front of us, already gone through by staff and recommended by the program or the directors of the various jurisdictions. So I still stand by. I think this is a bad time for the motion, and I would still oppose it.
And with that, Bob Murdoch.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. My name is Bob Murdoch. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Elk Grove, and perhaps I can shed a little bit of light on the discussions that staff had during their October 19th and November 16th meetings. I think what you're discussing is the same thing we struggled with when you provide $7 million to a number of local agencies with very little guidance. It was difficult to decide how best to split it up. First, I want to commend Mr. Hom on all the work he's done. He's done a terrific job in trying to get a consensus amongst all of us. I think when we met, there were a couple of things that guided our discussion. Number one was the need to try to get projects in the field as quickly as possible, keeping in mind a possible ballot measure next November. So we wanted to have money for projects that would actually happen this summer that the citizens could see, that we could put SB1 signs up and the citizens could recognize that the funding they voted for was actually, or the funding that the legislature voted for was actually being put to good use. The other was the source of funding. The source of funding is gas tax and vehicle license fees. So we recognize that. Also, we understood that SB1 had direct allocations to transit agencies. The City of Elk Grove's transit agency is going to get $1 million direct allocation from SB1 this year. I believe RT's direct allocation is in the $8 to $9 million number. So we took all of that together, trying to come up with a compromise of how best to split this up. At the October 19th meeting, we came to a consensus. At that meeting, RT received $1 million because that's what RT asked for. And I think the group of agency staff wanted to be fair and wanted to divide up the funding amongst all of us, recognizing that we all have needs. And $7 million, no matter how we split it up, is never going to resolve everybody's needs, but trying to address some of everybody's needs. Now, when we met again on November 16th, RT had changed their request to $2.3 million. The group discussed that. We're concerned that how big a a percentage that was, given the factors that we had talked about needing to put projects into the field this summer, and the source of funding, and the actual direct allocation of transit agencies under SB1. And Norm proposed a compromise of $1.3 million because RT indicated the $1 million figure and the $1.3 million figure. The $1.3 million figure, RT indicated that was their priority. So Norm proposed that. Now, the staff report indicates there was no consensus. I had a different understanding of when we walked out of that meeting, none of the staffs objected. While as a representative of Elk Grove, I would have liked to have had more money, and I'm sure RT would have liked to have had more money, Citrus Heights would have liked to have had more money. It was a compromise that we came to. And I would just indicate that this is an ongoing program. If we can survive next November, we certainly can revisit this, but I think the compromise we reached, the recommendation in the staff report, I think is a good one, and I would support that. And I would, again, just like to thank Mr. Hom for all the work he's done. I think he's done a terrific job trying to get all of us to come to some type of agreement. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Murdoch? I know Director Natoli has chimed in, but is it a direct question? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay.
Bob, is there a way that we can have the allocations so that we know how much of the overall money is going to transit versus this is 50% of the local funds versus the competitive funds, and how can we see the total allocation of SB1?
We certainly can put it together for you. I don't know if we wouldn't have it right now, but that's why I indicated that part of our discussion at the meetings were we recognize under SB1, and it is complicated, that there are direct allocations not only to the agencies but also to the transit agencies. So that was part of our discussion and understanding that SB1 did have those components and that transit needs were addressed in some way. Not that they're addressed completely. No one's ever going to completely address the roads versus transit needs, but there is funding. So it'd be something we certainly can work with Mr. Hom on, and we certainly can provide it to you, Mr. Hume.
Thank you. So to Member Fox's point, I think that's absolutely critical in making a decision like this, is to look at the entire sandwich and not just a slice of bread. To go back to the
y'all are making me hungry. Director Natoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not going to offer any sandwich or lunch analogies, but I am going to offer a substitute motion. And I think in light of the conversation here that I would move that we adopt staff recommendation for the allocations as proposed in the staff report, and that we actually, as a part of the motion, we can pick the date, but that we slate a workshop and a policy discussion for this board as it relates to future allocations and the information, some of which have been received today, some which will obviously be forthcoming, that we do that as a matter of advanced discussion prior to the August discussion, and so that we give sufficient time on the agenda. So that would be my motion, is that we continue this discussion, which has been very robust. People have weighed in as to their views, and certainly the whole question of fairness may be in the eyes of the beholders, but again, I think we all take this obligation very seriously, but in light of certainly I think where we are today, we need to move this item forward before next Friday, and I would hope that we could do that, and then actually as a part of the motion, if we want to pick a date and a time for a board workshop in the March, April, May timeframe for this board to visit this in its entirety and to talk about not only transit but certainly roads and any other aspects of the programs that are before us. So that's my motion.
Is that being offered as a substitute?
Yes, it is.
I'll take it as a friendly amendment, actually,
Okay.
just so that we can move forward.
Friendly amendment, is it accepted by Director Chenier? Okay. Director Harris, we now have a continued motion on the floor.
Yeah, so I was going to second it, but that was taken care of, so I would ask to call a question.
And the chair will gladly call the question. I don't think we need a roll call at this point, so I will say all those in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Opposed shows. All right. That was certainly entertaining, and I'm glad we got all of the controversy out of the way for today's meeting. Call item number 9, please.
Item number 9, Caltrans request to advance Measure A funding for high occupancy vehicle lanes on Interstate 5 and U.S. Highway 50.
I'd like to begin this item by asking Caltrans to come forward to present their project and their request. Following that, I will provide a staff analysis of how that request lines up with Measure A. And so, Caltrans staff.
I guess it's still morning almost. Good morning, Chair and members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity. The state highway system is really the backbone of the regional transportation system. In fact, it currently carries about 58% of all the vehicle miles traveled in this region. Polling consistently shows that freeway congestion relief is a high priority for the voters in this county. And the expenditure plan in 2004 for the new Measure A dedicated 9% of sales tax revenues to expansion of the bus carpool or HOV network in the county. So far, we received only about 7% of the revenues to date, less than that, in fact, and we received the smallest percentage of any other agency in the capital program. But that said, with the $52 million that we have received, we've been able to complete $235 million of improvements on US 50 and Interstate 80. We've completed the design for Interstate 5 HOV lanes between Elk Grove and Highway 50, and they're ready to list for construction if we can fund them. And we have the 50 Phase 2 HOV lanes between I-5 and Watt Avenue partway through the design, and the request today is to complete the design and right-of-way so that Project 2 would be shovel-ready and able to compete for funds. We've had a lot of discussion today about the SB1 Road Repair and Accountability Act, and because of that act, we actually have been able to secure $545 million to rehabilitate Interstate 5 and US 50 in the same areas that we hope to build the HOV lanes concurrently. The request is because we can actually deliver the benefits to the public years sooner at a much lower cost than if they were constructed separately. That's because the rehabilitation projects that we have programmed now will take care of a lot of the things like upgrading median barriers, improving the structural section, handle the majority of the traffic control, which is a very big expense in projects of this nature. On Interstate 5, for example, we'll be constructing the auxiliary lanes between Pocket and Florin, which were originally part of the $117 million estimate for the I-5 HOV lanes. We also will be replacing the Casalata pedestrian overcrossing with the rehabilitation project. And with all that, we think we can complete the HOV lanes on I-5 with $60 million, less than $60 million if you allocate the $30 million for I-5 that we're requesting today. There's some things on these projects that the HOV projects that can't be covered by rehabilitation funds, things like widening the bridges, constructing the sound walls, which are very important to the residents in the South Pocket area and just south of the overcrossing there. The sound walls along the south side of US 50 also are dependent on HOV lanes moving forward to be constructed because those are mitigations for those projects. I know that you're short of time, so I'm trying to skip around a little bit, but the bottom line is that we have an opportunity now to compete for the congested corridor portion of the SB1 funds. Our applications technically aren't due to the CTC until February 16th, but practically going through the Caltrans process, they're due last week. So we're very much interested in getting a decision as soon as possible so we'll know whether or not we have to take the HOV lanes out of our project. We in fact have them in the project, and I skipped over at the beginning, but we're only at this position to be ready to go to construction because of Measure A and because of some funding from SACOG. Between the two, we were able to clear the environmental process and complete the design on I-5, and we're halfway through the design on US 50 using Measure A funds. So Measure A has been very significant in our ability to attract discretionary funding from outside the area to this area, and we think we have an opportunity now to deliver benefits to the public years earlier than otherwise possible.
Thank you very much. I see Director Hume has a question.
Not a question, just a comment, because I don't know that it was addressed specifically in the comments, is I've met with these folks, and the amount of cost savings as well as avoidance of inconvenience to the public by joining these two projects together is, I think, almost a once-in-a-lifetime sort of opportunity that all those planets aligned in the right way, so I fully support it.
Thank you. Director Fox. We do have public comment, by the way.
Just a very quick question. When did Caltrans change their policy regarding sound walls? Their policy was they didn't build sound walls that allow their jurisdiction to be used, but they would not build them?
The sound walls that are part of these projects are for mitigation for the expanded freeway. And so it's not a retrofit sound wall, which would be going in to construct a sound wall where the freeway was already there. That's why the people in the South Pocket, for example, have been waiting for over 20 years. The sound wall was not constructed before, and there's no way to construct the sound wall with state funding until we have a project in that area. It was back in the 1990s that the CTC, I think maybe even a legislature passed a bill to say this is the final retrofit sound wall program. You can do these, but then that's the end of it.
Okay, for the sake of time then, I guess the answer to my question is you can do it if it's part of the construction process on the new construction?
If the environmental studies indicate that it meets the benefit criteria that's established by the federal government.
Then Caltrans can build it, but you cannot go back and retrofit existing until you do new projects. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Director Chenier.
Yeah, just real quickly, could you go over Caltrans' time frame again? Did you say that it's going to take you guys take 4 months to work this through your process?
The CTC is expecting the applications to be submitted on February 16th. Caltrans is gathering all of their applications from around the state. We submitted fact sheets last week?
Yeah, last week we submitted the fact sheets. The applications are due on January 15th to Caltrans' internal process from all the 12 districts, and then they'll be summarizing those and submitting to CTC in February.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Swin.
Thank you, Chair. Just for a question regarding this, because it's pertinent to the HOV lanes, we had talked about looking at reviewing the hours of operation for the HOV lanes, and this, while separate from this project, it is pertinent. So I just wanted for the rest of the board to hear the opportunity for a review of those operational hours.
Yes, Caltrans is currently conducting a study of the operation of all the HOV network in the Sacramento area. That will include some evaluations of whether hot lanes or toll lanes for single occupant vehicles would make sense. That will also include evaluations of the appropriate hours for HOV operation. Part of the reason that we're doing that study is that the FHWA, or the Federal Highway Administration, is concerned that we don't have free flow in the HOV lanes as much as they would like. And so from their perspective, they want us to consider whether or not we should increase the number of people that need to be in a vehicle, evaluate the hours of operation, all those kinds of things. Because the real benefit of HOV lanes or bus carpool lanes is that the people that are traveling in transit or that are in carpools or van pools or on local buses have a predictable travel time. Typically in transit it takes a little bit longer than if you're driving your own personal car, but that predictable travel time allows people to plan and make that. It also allows emergency vehicles to get to where they need to go with better time. So that's a long answer to your question, but we have a study that should be completed in May or June that will provide a lot of the answers that you're seeking, and will evaluate.
Well, just to clarify, my answer I'm seeking is that they can recognize if we reduce the hours or extend them a little bit so it begins later, we can move some of that peak volume through a little earlier and thereby, reducing some traffic.
We'll be modeling different hours of operation to see what the impacts are.
Good, thank you. Yeah, and I just want to echo my fellow Councilman and Director Hume's comments earlier about the merits of this proposal. Thank you.
Director Carr.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Is there a motion on the floor?
There's not.
I move the staff recommendation, the early delivery, the cost savings, the leveraging of dollars, and the non-competition.
We do have a lot of public comment, by the way. Okay, we now have a motion on the floor and a second, but we still have public comment. And Director Peters, I believe, has a question or comment.
Yeah, thank you. I had a couple of questions. One to the people here from the city of Sacramento. My memory is that some years ago, the city council voted against HOV lanes on that section of Highway 50. Are you all on the council since then? I mean, has the policy changed?
I remember
Is there a policy?
Well, let me just say that no future binding council can bind, if I could repeat the attorneys in the room, but, I think this is, I'll speak to this. I mean, I think this is a good project. Everything that our staff have said so far, particularly about mitigating the issues that are, that the neighbors are facing through these intersections, both on Interstate 5 and Highway 50. I mean, I don't know of another project that I've seen before where our both state and local staff have combined together to find the maximum return on investment, reduce congestion time, reduce the cost of the project, the construction time, and also deal with some of the long-standing issues of sound walls and particulate matters on this issue. And so I've heard from my constituents clearly that this is an important piece to move forward. And Mr. Chair, I guess I'd like to hear comments from the public or before we continue to move on as well.
Well, I'm sorry, I wasn't finished.
Yes,
so.
Ms. Peters still has the floor.
And this is not a question for you, Mr. Lewis. It's for Mr. Hom. How would we pay for this? And what happens to the projects that were going to be built with this money? How would that all work?
Several things I'd like to just point out in the staff analysis is that on the second page of the staff report, I've listed the projects that are actually next, scheduled to go next.
The current plan.
Yes,
right.
According to the current plan, that is scheduled to go in the next project cycle. And what Caltrans is asking for is that they would join in along with these projects in the next contract cycle. What I've done is I've done some preliminary analysis to see where our funding situation is. And what I've concluded is that on a pay-go basis that we are able to fund these projects, but that there's not enough money left over to also fund the Caltrans project. So in order to accommodate Caltrans' request, we would have to find a future funding source when the time comes. It could be another measure, it could be SB1, or it could be a bond issue. Now, our recent bond capacity analysis shows that we have bonding capacity of about $61 million in the year 2020, which would dovetail.
Sorry, back up there. I didn't hear what you said about 61 what?
We do have capacity to issue a $61 million bond in about the year 2020.
So all these projects would be put off under the current plan, would be put off for 2 or 3 years?
No.
Until there was a new measure or the board decided to bond to pay for them?
No, not exactly. So the projects that I have listed, we made 5-year, these are included in a 5-year commitment that we made 2 years ago. And so...
For Measure A?
For Measure A, yes. And so my analysis shows that we're able to fund these projects with the funds that we currently have plus future pay-go funds. So we're sufficient on those. So the Caltrans request should not impact these projects. Now, in terms of funding the Caltrans project, we don't have money for that currently. And so we would have to identify a future funding source for that project. So potential sources are SB1, it could be another measure, or,
okay, so if
or a bond issue.
so I understand you. These projects will still all be built that are under your current plan, but you don't have money for the Caltrans proposal, which is what, $42 or $3 million, right?
That's correct.
And you would propose a discussion of where that money should come from. It could be a future measure, it could be a bond of some kind. But how can we go ahead and approve this without knowing where the money's coming from? Will they not need, I mean, when will funding start for something like this?
Their requested funding starts in the year fiscal year 20.
1920.
Yeah, yes, fiscal year 2019. So that's a good question. I think that was part of what I had listed in my analysis was that the Caltrans request is coming before we're doing a lot of other processes, and it's understandable given what they're trying to do.
Which I think is great to save
Yes.
that kind of money. I just want to make sure we understand where the money's coming from.
Exactly, and I think you're hitting on exactly what I was trying to hit at in the staff report was that it's an excellent project, but there are some unknowns that we are, in a sense, by approving this, that we are committing ourselves to finding a way of funding this project sometime in the future. And we don't know exactly what that is yet.
And would the funding be entirely on STA, or would Caltrans pay us back, or would they pay the interest on a bond?
Those are all things that we
You're
are
not
considering.
making any future commitments right now. I think what he's saying is if you advance these funds to Caltrans, that at some point in the future, to prevent these local projects from being delayed up to 4 years, you would have to find some other money. But of course, right now, you're not taking any action, or you're not committing yourself to a future bond issuance or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of, there are
We're
unknowns.
committing to the money to go to Caltrans.
Right. Caltrans, this project would go ahead of these local projects listed in the staff report.
Caltrans
As
would what?
I understand it, though,
Wait,
this
wait,
is money that's
wait,
already...
What did you say?
Advancing these funds to Caltrans now would put this project ahead of the local projects.
Okay, I thought you
listed in
said
the
they
staff
wouldn't need any
report.
money till 2019.
I think what we're saying is that according to my analysis, we have sufficient funding for the existing planned projects, but we don't have identified a funding source for the Caltrans project, but we do have the capacity.
Well, but if I understood County Council right, he's saying that the Caltrans project would get paid for ahead of the current plan in the staff report. Did I understand that?
That was my understanding.
Okay. My understanding is that they would all...
Well, you guys both understand who came up with the plan. Who are you understanding?
I think either way, the problem you find is that you're going to have to find more money for some or each of these projects.
Mm-hmm.
I think the anticipation is there could well be a bond issuance in 2020. But technically you're not committing yourself. You can't commit yourself to that right now.
Not to a bond issue. How can we commit ourselves to money we don't
You're not.
have?
That's what I'm saying.
What are we doing?
What are we doing then?
The proposal is to enter into a contract with Caltrans that would provide them funding starting in the year 2019.
Well, that sounds like a commitment, Norm.
That is.
It is.
That is.
Commitment.
It is. It is.
That's the commitment you're making, you would be making.
So that's why the Caltrans project would be ahead of the street improvements under the current plan.
In
Right?
terms of having a right to the Measure A funds, my understanding is that the proposal is that Caltrans would have the right to 100% of the funds to be advanced. And if no other money is found in the next 3 to 4 years, the local projects listed here would either be put back a couple of years, 3 or 4 years, or you have to find additional money within that time.
Yeah. So I thought these projects were going to, I'm not sure who I'm addressing here. I thought these projects were going to start construction next year.
I think what Bill is saying is that once we throw all these projects into one pool, competing for the same, competing basically for the first set of funds, it could be whoever's invoicing first gets paid, and then unless we find another funding source.
What?
That's crazy.
We're back to the sandwiches. I mean, you're talking about like Caltrans goes in this current plan, and then, but you don't have enough money to fund the current plan, so whoever comes in first gets the money?
I'm sorry for the confusion. If we were just to consider all the projects without Caltrans, our PAYGO funds would be sufficient to fund those projects.
Okay.
Okay. Caltrans requests, I don't know exactly where that puts them in line in terms of the relationship with other projects. I guess this is something that still needs to be worked out.
I think that's the policy question that we're actually being asked to make today, is whether or not we're moving Caltrans to the front of the line or not.
Right.
Sounds like it to me, but I've got
I think
no
it's-
commitment on this side and commitment on this side.
Well, I mean, the staff report says that the money, that this project would be moved ahead of the projects listed. So that's just what I'm reading from the staff report. But it sounds like that may be an issue that this board needs to resolve right now, is if all of these projects come in at the same time, who has a right to that money if there's not additional money 2, 3, or 4 years from now?
And what I meant by that comment in the staff report was that we're asking this decision be made ahead of the other projects that are listed. Not that it would be ahead of them in priority, but that we're outside of our normal decision-making process by considering this ahead of what we would normally be doing in the spring. We're asked to do this in December, the December before.
But what about the commitment under Measure A to these projects?
So in Measure A, there is commitment that we fund projects, but it's not on a year-by-year basis. And so I think that's where the plan of finance came in, and where the early action capital allocation plan. Those are working documents that have always been presented to the board, but it's never been adopted by the board. And so that has been to guide our expenditures and our contracts, but it is actually not part of the measure.
Now, I certainly have no interest in cutting off debate on something as important as this, but just keep in mind we're going to lose board members soon, so.
Could I explain the way I understand?
I just got to understand how it's getting paid for and who's in line, what order they're in, and how we plan to pay for it.
It is an excellent question, and it is one of those things where I did put out that we are, in a sense, by approving this, that we are making a commitment that we will find funding for this project sometime in the future, but that we do have the capacity to issue bonds to fund this project.
You're suggesting that as a source?
That is a potential source, yes.
Yeah, you're basically asking us to commit to a bond measure today, or not a measure, but a bond sale. Otherwise, we can't keep our promise to the voters, I think.
On the current schedule, I think the money will be there eventually, even without a bond issuance.
Eventually,
it's just
yes.
These local projects
Hang
would
on.
be delayed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Director Frost.
So I just want to make sure, I think what I'm understanding is that if we vote for this, in theory, there may not be funding for the other projects listed here, and in the timeline. It might be there, but it might be there later. But then again, in 2019, when we revisit our entire plan and the corrected revenue projections, in theory, there may be not enough money anyway for all the projects. So there could, in theory, this could be putting them ahead, but there might not be enough for, like the Capital Connector. They've been working hard, and they're going to be positioned to maybe get some other funding, federal funding and other funding. And so dedicating funds to getting them to where they help them get more funding is important. But all these projects are important. So what you're saying is we don't know. We're making this decision not knowing if there will be the funds.
I would say that conceptually, I think you are correct. But I would say that the likelihood of us not being able to identify funds to pay for it is low.
So is it a delay in funds? And if there is a delay, if we're pulling down this bond and they're going to utilize, 40 million of it, they're not utilizing all of it, is there a way to make sure that some of our other important projects like the Capital Connector get funded in preparation for the work that they're trying to do to get other funding?
So the STA has the capacity to issue bonds up to $61 million in 2020, and Caltrans' request is only for about 2/3 of that. So if there was a future bond issue, if it was $61 million, which I would probably recommend that we bond for the full amount that we're able to, and so the excess funding would be used to advance other projects that are ready to go. At this point, we don't know what those projects are because I think there's a lot of work ahead of us in determining what our priorities are, which projects are ready to go, and what the board's priorities are. But there would be some excess funding left over to advance other projects.
But in the spirit of the Measure A, all these projects have to be funded by the end of the Measure A. So what if we don't have enough money? Then what?
Well,
somebody didn't get what they were supposed to get, I guess.
Right, that's true, but I think what Norm is saying is that that money should be there.
Okay, Director Hume.
Wow, great opportunity here to jump into the mud on this. Norm, I want to ask a question here. We started this meeting by looking at the debacle the previous predecessor of yours put this agency into with a spreadsheet that had a $283 million hole at the end of it because it didn't account for debt service. If we were to go out for a bond issuance, and if we did go to the maximum capacity, would you build that debt service into the spreadsheet, and would the program still more or less be able to fund the projects that we've put forward at this point?
The preliminary sheets that I've already started to put together do reflect the debt service in there. So that's the numbers that we're working off of, are realistic numbers. The other part of your question is I'm sorry, could you?
The other part of your question.
Which part did you just answer? I didn't know my question had two parts.
So the debt service is definitely considered into our future.
City council meeting without the screen.
On the 61. Right.
Yes.
Right. So, okay. So, because I think we've kind of dancing around the issue here a little bit and not spelling it out very clearly, which is what we're being asked to do and what I think makes sense because of the opportunity that Caltrans has on the table right now with the planets aligning, as I mentioned earlier, is essentially reprioritizing to fund Caltrans. This is money that was already programmed to come to them, but in later years, to pull those monies forward and prioritize them ahead of what would have been the local projects that would have received those expenditures in starting in 19. And then the next step will be go out to a bond issuance, most likely, to backfill so that not only those local projects get funded, but also potentially additional monies, maybe to the Capital Southeast Connector or other worthy projects. So I think that to boil it down in essence, that's essentially what we're doing, is we're saying these guys have a project that is ready to go. It's going to save millions upon millions. It's going to save the inconvenience to the public. Is it important to us to put that ahead of what we would have spent the money on otherwise, and then make the commitment to come back and backfill those monies so that we keep the overall program moving forward?
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes. Now we're going to go to public comment. John Dieter.
Good.
Keep in mind that, as I said before, we are about to lose members, so.
Good afternoon, Chair Kennedy and members of the STA Board. I'm John Dieter, speaking for ECOS, the Environmental Council of Sacramento, and I think the clerk gave you my written statement, which I will try to very briefly summarize. Carpools are an important part of a sound transportation policy, and ECOS supports carpools as long as it's a conversion of existing lanes to HOV lanes. We don't want to see added capacity because that induces more demand. And Caltrans is doing this project. I'm talking specifically about the US 50 project. They did this project without a full environmental EIR. They did it with a mitigated negative declaration, which allowed them to sidestep public input. So we're concerned about air quality issues on this freeway, particularly the elevated section through Sacramento, which Caltrans didn't adequately address. We're concerned about the prospect of induced demand on the extra capacity on the freeway. And so we have actually filed a lawsuit in July challenging the environmental document, and we're still have this lawsuit active. So the final paragraph, the Environmental Council of Sacramento urges the STA Governing Board to defer funding of US 50 HOV project until the ECOS lawsuit is settled and Caltrans completes a satisfactory environmental assessment, including a comprehensive evaluation of the effects of induced demand. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is going to have to pardon me, but your initials are JR, I believe.
Sorry about that.
Okay. And by the way, the executive director, I apologize, but we're going to not have closed session today. We'll do it at the next meeting.
Sorry for the handwriting. My name is Justin Renier. I'm the president of the Elmhurst Neighborhood Association. I suffer from engineer's handwriting. I'm sure you guys understand. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of you. I do understand the concerns on the overall funds that have been raised by board members Peters, Natoli, Suen, Howell, and others. But I would agree with board member Hume that this is just moving forward monies that would already be expended anyway. And aside from being shovel ready, this is a very good project. This is a project that leverages federal, state, and other funding to get done. This is a project that allows us to spend less money to get the same result. This is a project with regional benefits. I won't belabor the points of the interstate system and the highway system being our arterials for the area and its economic growth. This allows us to match existing infrastructure. Aside from regional benefits, this reduces air pollution, particularly particulate pollution next to UC Davis Med Center, which has a number of obviously sensitive populations because, well, it's a medical center. This is something that our neighborhood has been waiting for, in particular, for quite some time. But I think aside from our interest in it, it's just a good project. And from our perspective, we would just respectfully ask that the board accept the staff recommendation. They've clearly put a lot of time and energy. Getting Caltrans down here is another lot of time and energy they don't often see. We just hope that it gets done sooner rather than later, because it's a beneficial project. And the sooner we get it done, the longer we've got for the benefits to compound to the region. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Pat Clark.
Good afternoon, Chair Kennedy, members of the board. I'm Pat Clark. I'm president of South Pocket Homeowners Association. And first I have to say, I'm just so happy to be here talking to you today. This has been a really, really, really long project. South Pocket Homeowners Association is a neighborhood of about 400 homes. We're at the base of the Freeport Water Tower next to I-5. We're in the city of Sacramento, and we're ably represented by City Council District 7.
And County Supervisor District 2.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the caveat. Our neighborhood association boundaries, which are relevant for this discussion today, are Pocket Road on the north, the Sacramento River on the south, Greenhaven Drive on the west, and very importantly, Interstate 5 on the east. That is our boundary. I'm here today representing the association to support the proposal to accelerate the funding. We have had a journey of about 25 years to get a sound wall here. Our neighborhood was built without a sound wall. We are immediately adjacent to the freeway. Starting in the 1990s, we worked with Sacramento City Council. Then in the 2000s, we started working with Caltrans. We've been to numerous scoping meetings. We've participated in the noise study back in 2000, 2008. We participated in the draft environmental impact report meetings and the final environmental impact report. And then this past year, multiple meetings in 2017. So this is my opportunity to highlight that we are adjacent to not just any California freeway, we are adjacent to the premier north-south transportation corridor for the entire West Coast. So our need is acute. We are happy that our sound wall need has been included in the I-5 HAV project, and we thank Caltrans very much for doing that. Also, they have included a sound wall for our neighbors on the other side of the freeway that will benefit residents in Meadowview. So we thank you very much for doing that. This request to accelerate the funding will answer our acute need, and we have worked long and diligently for it. Also, the items that are articulated very well in the staff report, fundamental reasons of accelerating the funding here will reduce the cost by combining the two projects into one. The benefits of reduced traffic congestion can be brought sooner rather than later, and the general regional benefits can be brought sooner rather than later. Those are all good things, and we stand firmly behind them. I do want to say a very sincere thank you to Norm, who's been extremely easy to work with. We very much appreciate that, and the project managers at Caltrans, Wayne and Sutha, and we thank you for your consideration of this very important item to our neighborhood today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And thank you, directors, for hanging in there. We have one more speaker, Mr. Rogers. Welcome to our neighborhood.
Thank you.
I had to.
That's, yeah, it was original.
Dennis Rogers. Just for the record, he lives in my neighborhood.
Yeah, my middle name's Michael. Mikey eats everything. I'm a little overweight. I hear that too. I'm Dennis Rogers. I'm here on behalf of Vice Mayor Rick Jennings, who represents the 7th District that's included in the 2nd District in the city of Sacramento in support of this proposal. And I really want to thank Director Hume for kind of clarifying this. The funding for this has already been allocated. It's in later years. You're just pulling it forward. And the request is, as a backstop, to potentially issue a bond to make sure that the projects that are currently listed in the staff report, as well as this acceleration that takes advantage of a tremendous amount of cost savings, as well as a tremendous reduction in impacts to my boss's constituents, to take advantage of that in partnership with Caltrans. And that's simply what it is. It will not impact the others. Really what we're talking about is if SB1 comes, there's additional funding for this. This is really just taking advantage of a once-in-a-generational opportunity for a tremendous amount of cost savings and a reduction in the impact to individuals that my boss and Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Soon and Mr. Hume represent, as well as I think Mr. Natoli as well. Thank you very much. And I respectfully ask for your aye vote on behalf of my boss.
Thank you, Dennis. And that is all of the public comment. I see no questions of the board. We do have a motion on the floor made by Director Carr and seconded by Director Guerra. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you very much. And with that, we have comments of authority members. I see none. And we will have closed session next time. And we're adjourned.